10 years prior to the outbreak of the Second World War and the Holocaust was the beginning of the Great Depression in America. While Adolf Hitler was passing anti-Semitic laws in Germany, anti-immigration laws were being passed by President Hoover in the United States. The Great Depression and the hardships that it wrought intensified grassroots anti-Semitism, isolationism, and xenophobia. However, as the years passed and the United States economy began to rebound under the social programs implemented by FDR, Americans began to focus their attention on the growing problems in Germany.
The president had been preparing us. We'd already been in a negotiation to turn over a whole bunch of warships to the British. It was pretty obvious that there was some evil stuff going on against us that we were very much opposed to.
Americans were aware of the evil actions in Germany, but they did not know the specifics, and they were reluctant to be dragged into a world war so soon after World War I and the Great Depression. Across the pond, a storm was gathering in Germany from the leftover conflicts and tensions of World War I. Recently elected Chancellor Adolf Hitler had fought for Germany in World War I and was hungry to restore Germany to the strong nation it once was. Taking advantage of the country's economic weakness subsequent to the Great War, Hitler seized power quickly and effortlessly and soon retained absolute authority over the state. On a continental scale, the growth of Hitler's new Reich triggered anxiety and concern in other European leaders. Not long after, the new Germany would impede its own borders, and now Europe was forced to act. In September of 1938, a conference was held in Munich to discuss Germany's intentions. In resolution, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain proposed the appeasement of Germany by granting it the Sudetenland in return for Hitler's promise to cease any further aggression. This would soon prove only to be a mistake. The mood of the American people shifted dramatically after the Japanese attack upon Pearl Harbor.
There was a genuine countrywide support for supporting the effort to beat all three of the enemy countries.
The sneak attack sparked indignation and grim determination in the American people.
I've never seen this country as united since then as it was then.
The wartime economy took over, and immediately soldiers were drafted for the military. The American people were going to defeat the Axis powers at any cost. Yet despite this united hatred of the Axis powers, the American people remained woefully ignorant of the Holocaust and the other terrible actions in Germany.
And I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to issues of war and peace. I was mainly interested in how I could get involved in it.
At this point in the war, the primary American motive for fighting was self-defense rather than fighting to uphold American values and to defend the Jewish people in Europe. September 1st, 1939. Nazi troops invade Poland, deliberately breaking their promise in Munich a year earlier.
But the bomb scare was because that same day, on May 14, Rotterdam had been bombed by the Germans. The Germans blanketed the town and with so-called incendiary bombs, causing great fires, and thousands of people died, and many wounded. And so the Hitler, who had personally ordered the bombardment of Rotterdam, said, "If you do not surrender right away, we will do the same to Amsterdam." And that was in the evening of the 14th May that Holland surrendered. And a couple of days later, pretty soon, we saw the Germans marching into Amsterdam and singing "Und wir fahren gegen Engeland." That was which means we will cross the North Sea and conquer England.
Soon, all of Holland was taken by the Germans, and as quickly as the invasion happened, Dutch Jews were rounded up and sent to concentration camps back in Germany and Poland. Back in America, the country's focus was entirely on the war, and new discoveries were made about the evil actions in Germany. In August of 1942, the State Department received a report that revealed the systematic persecution of the Jewish people by the German government. However, the United States government was still reluctant to release these details. Eventually, in November of 1942, the government cleared a rabbi to release the information to the public. Despite this shocking news, the American people widely disregarded these statements about the Holocaust. The American people were so eager for revenge that the obscure news of the Holocaust seemed unimportant. As for the Holocaust's victims, circumstances worsened greatly as the world reached the peak of the war.
First was a transition camp, so they were interrogated, sometimes tortured, they didn't get enough to eat, and then they were transported onwards to Germany, if in the eyes of the Germans it was a bad case. Now, Nanny's father was a doctor, he was the GP of the village. He was one of the VIPs, and he saved many lives in a sense. What did he do? What did he do?
He told the Germans, that, for instance, that there was an epidemic of a certain disease, and he said, Jews have to come back because else you get it too.
Germans were afraid of these epidemics.
So that's how he got them out. And then the people in the village of Vught got these people underground away.
They stayed a couple of days in Nanny's house on the Maurikplein in Vught, and then they were disinfected. They got food, and they were strong. As soon as they were stronger again, the underground resistance looked after them so that they stayed out of German hands.
In Amsterdam, citizens faced harsh Nazi brutality in the streets, the ever-present threat of deportation to concentration camps, and were surviving on one meager meal a day.
In the winter of 1944-45 it was really bad. All football, the soccer stopped. My little sister and I had to go to the government-run food kitchens in order to get at least one modest meal per day. One wonderful thing I remember, that was in February 1945, so quite very late in the war, when many people were suffering from cold and hunger. It was announced that we would receive 1 or 2 loaves of Swedish white bread per family. The bread with margarine tasted like a delicious cake to us.
The American people did not truly realize the extent of the Holocaust until concentration camps were liberated by troops. Although the American people already had some indistinct awareness of the heinous crimes in Germany, the crimes were not well publicized and not well recognized by the press and the people. The liberation of the Nazi camps by Western Allies was the first tangible news of the Holocaust in Germany, although it took some time for the news to circulate.
And I became aware of the Holocaust more after it happened than during the time. And it wasn't until probably 10 years after the war that I became aware of the awfulness of the Holocaust.
After this news, there was a huge outcry for justice.
It was, first of all, hard to believe that people could be so inhuman. It was something that was an abominable evil.
The American people supported the Jewish people and condemned the German oppressors with a passion that was fueled by shame and guilt.
We have a feeling of guilt at not having been there for the Jewish people when they needed it. In fact, I still have some sense of guilt in that regard.
Rather than be remembered as a war fought in self-defense, as it originally was for the Americans, it was to be remembered as a war fought for the freedom and protection of others. The American actions as a result of the Holocaust came to represent the defense of freedom and equality, and demonstrated how these righteous principles will, in the face of evil, always prevail. For the Dutch, a new sense of hope had permeated the nation after the success at Normandy. In May of 1945, Scottish, British, and Canadian troops would reach Holland.
They came in, it was a beautiful day, bright and sunny. I remember the Canadians coming, and there were thousands and thousands of people filling the streets, waving flags and welcoming the liberating army. People, I remember, were screaming, waving, and were beyond themselves.
They jumped on the Canadian trucks, jeeps, ducks. There was a special
amphibian vehicle and other vehicles, girls embracing and kissing the soldiers. The soldiers handed out their rations, including chocolate. They gave us cookies, chewing gum, cigarettes. And I remember them standing for fun in their open trucks. And they particularly liked to snatch these handbags of these girls who were working on the street, just to tease them.
They came along the walls, and everybody greeted them, and we were happy. And I remember we were standing outside the front door, and they thought still Germans were in Vught. But we said, no, there's nobody. They have gone back to Germany. They were afraid to they fled.
Still nationally celebrated today, Liberation Day in the Netherlands marks their independence and victory over years of hardship, hunger, and suffering during World War II.